Drizzt is one of, if not the most famous characters in all of D&D lore. At the very least, he is certainly a fan favorite. Today, we are going to try to make two builds revolving around this legendary hero of the North. One build will roleplay as Drizzt himself, while the other is a homebrew I made up asking the question, what if Drizzt never became a hero, but instead followed the ways of the Lolth Drow and Menzoberranzan? Both builds will be featured for those who want to try this in early game through Acts 1 and 2, but before we continue, I do want to note this is not a lore video, but I think we should give some information about Drizzt for those who may not know who he is or much about him. Drizzt is famously known as a Mal Drow Ranger who had forsaken the evil ways of his home and people in the Underdark to eventually become known as the hero of the North. Whenever one might think of him, they usually think about his famous green cloak that was received on his departure to Icewind Dale, along with his dual scimitars and of course his panther companion Guinevere, who was actually summoned from the astral plane using a figurine of wondrous power. But did you know, before he was a ranger, he was actually trained to be a fighter by his father? It's through that training that he learned to wield a scimitar in each hand, and it's partly because of his father's death that he fled the home of Menzoberranzan to drift the Underdark for 10 years. While living within the Underdark, Drizzt really regressed to a real bestial state of mind and instinct, I guess you could say, and he identified this as the Hunter. He even became close to being completely consumed by it until he was forced to master it after nearly harming some children. Despite mastering this state of mind, whenever his friends are in grave danger, one could see him lose himself to the hunter's urges once more. Drizzt didn't actually learn the ways of the ranger until after he came to the surface and met a man named Montage, also known as Mushi. It is through Montage that Drizzt learned the way of the goddess Mielekki, who is the patron of druids and rangers. There's so much more I could talk about with Drizzt and his background, but this isn't meant to be a lore video, it's a build video. So hopefully this quick little background gave you some context to hopefully make the builds make sense. So let's begin with build 1, Hero of the North. Before we get into the video guys, a lot of you that watch my videos are not subscribed, so if you do like my content, subscribe, and if you enjoy this video, give it a like. Alright everybody, it is time to make Drizzt in game. Naturally, you are going to be a drow because that's what he is. Even though it doesn't show it here, you will gain the darkness spell as well as fairy fire, which is very fitting because in the lore of Drizzt, even though he did have the capabilities to become a great magic user, he only really used the globe of darkness and fairy fire from my understanding in the books, which is nice because you get those base as the drow race anyway. You also gain a bonus of having dancing lights, which is just a free cantrip you can have as well. The sub race is going to be Lolth because that's what he started out as inside his hometown of Menzoberranzan. Even though eventually he does leave this, we don't have that option here. Starting class is actually going to be fighter, and I know what you're thinking, like you think Drizzt was a ranger. Yeah, he was known to be a ranger, but he was trained to be a fighter first. And in majority of all the things I could find for him, he's known as a fighter / ranger, and I even found one where they said he was a fighter ranger barbarian. This build is not going to be for max, it's going to be for Acts 1 and 2, so with that being said, we are starting out as a fighter. As a fighter, you get 2 weapon fighting, which is really nice because that means you can dual wield literally at the start of the game, assuming you find weapons right away to dual wield with. Background here, I am going with folk hero. Soldier could also work, but he is a hero of the North, so I do think folk hero is very fitting. Ability scores, I'm sure some people are going to comment, well, why didn't I min-max more? You certainly can. If you really want to min-max more, you can change your ability scores. That being said, I like the scores I have here. With these scores here, you have no negatives to any of your skill proficiencies, which I think is nice to have, considering you are a hero-esque character. Dexterity is at 17. With the hag hair, you'll get the 18, and with 1 ability score improvement at level 4, you'll get the 20 dexterity, which is going to be max pretty much until you get to endgame at Act 3. And that's really, really strong because that's going to give you +5 to hit and damage. The wisdom I have here, because eventually you will be multiclassing into the ranger, and they do have some spells that will help out with wisdom, though not many. So if you would like to drop wisdom to put points into other things, you're more than welcome to. If you don't plan to use the hag's hair, this is what you could do instead. I do plan to use the hag's hair, which is why I have my wisdom up a little bit higher, but feel free to move this around. One thing to note, you could also put these points into charisma if you wanted to get your charisma to 12. Fairy Fire does use charisma for your spell DC, so this may be a good option as well. Your skill proficiencies here, we're going with athletics and acrobatics just because I think it's very fitting. Feel free to pick something else though if you would like. It's really going to be up to you on what you want to do here. When it comes to character creation itself though, there's going to be some things we really need to point out. First off, your eyes need to be purple. Even though majority of the drows have red eyes, Drizzt was special and he actually had violet eyes, and I like picking the purple too because I do find it stands out a little bit more compared to the other purple colors. When it comes to body art, you're not going to be picking anything. General, pick whatever face you like here, but I'm a big fan of the default one, which is number 5. I think it gives him a nice jawline, so that's what I'm going with here. The default skin color is fine because it fits him. And the voice, really, it's going to be up to you. Pick what you want. I think voice 1 is pretty nice though, so I'm a fan of it. And body type, I chose body type 2. I think body type 4 is just way too bulky for Drizzt considering he's meant to be a smaller character. If I recall, he's only about 5'4"-ish. So this giant drow, it just doesn't fit in my opinion. So we go with body type 2. Now we're going to take a look at makeup. If you want to put eye makeup on to make your eyes a little darker to stand out more, you are more than welcome to do that. I think it's pretty cool looking. I'm not going to though because I do like having a better face in my actual cinematics, so that's up to you. Now hair is going to be a controversial subject because there are a few different hairstyles that could fit. One of them, in my opinion, fits him really well if you compare it to the cinematic I showed at the beginning of the video, this Will-O-Wisp one. But he just has a massive forehead here. I don't like his giant forehead at all. So I went with Bardic Inspiration. I think it's a good other hairstyle that could fit for Drizzt without looking terrible. I'm actually a big fan of this hairstyle, so I went with this, which is why I did that. So feel free to pick the other hairstyles if you think another one fits better, but this is what I went with. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the video. So at level 2, you get Action Surge. This is really great. For those who don't know, you can use this once per short rest. This will give you another action in combat. So for example, you can attack twice with your main hand, attack with your offhand using a bonus action, use Action Surge, and this will allow you to attack twice again with your main hand. This is nice just for extra burst damage. It's nice to give yourself extra movement. It has a lot of uses. This will not renew bonus actions, however, so do keep that in mind. When it comes to subclasses here, I actually think Champion is going to fit more than Battlemaster. Drizzt is a very deadly character. I mean, he is a really strong combat unit, and what's better than critting more often? You can crit on a roll of a 19 or a 20 with this, so you have a 10% chance to crit at all times. Battlemaster does fit, and there are some great maneuvers here you can pick. So pick what you want. It's a video game. Unless you're trying to be a hardcore role player, honestly, pick what you think is going to be more fun. Both the Battlemaster and Champion, in my opinion, do fit. Fighter level 4, you get your first feat, and we are going ability improvement here. You want to increase your dexterity up 2 points, and with the Hag's Hair, this will be 20. And with a score of 20, you'll have a +5 chance to hit and +5 damage for your finesse weapons, which is really nice. And you do have a bow you could use as well if you do want to get some range attacks in, so that would be nice as well. Okay, so level 5, you get your extra attack, which is fantastic. Okay, so level 6, we are not going to take this feat. You could take a feat right away if you wanted, and if you do, in my opinion, I would say Savage Attacker is a really good feat. With some of the gear pieces you will use as this build, this is going to reroll the damage, which is really nice because it will reroll your weapon damage, and if your weapons happen to do bonus damage like fire, poison, acid, psychic, whatever it is, this will reroll that damage as well. So I do find Savage Attacker to be really useful. However, if you don't want to use Savage Attacker and you want to go ability improvement to maybe get your constitution up higher, if you want to go pretty much any other feat, feel free. In my opinion though, I do like Savage Attacker. But we're not going to actually take the feat. I think the better route to go here is actually going to start multi-classing into Ranger. So as soon as you get 1 point in a Ranger, you're going to unlock a few things here. You have your favorite enemy here, and in the lore, I think Magebreaker fits really well. At one point in time, he was possibly training to be a cleric or a wizard, and he has the capabilities to do that, so it would make sense he would know how to fight them. So Magebreaker fits, Sanctified Stalker fits, and so does Bounty Hunter. I think Bounty Hunter really fits because he talked about being the hunter, like he had that hunter persona or like that state of mind he was in when he was inside the Underdark. So I think this fits as well. The Bounty Hunter also gives you really nice things. It gives you proficiency in investigation. And when you hit with your ensnaring strike, whether it's melee or ranged, they will have disadvantage on their saving throws, which is also a really nice thing to have. So in my opinion, those are the ones that fit. Natural Explorer here, there's going to be a couple of things. Wasteland Wanderer Cold, I think, fits really well. He does go north. He becomes the hero of the north, so he does travel in the cold, so it would make sense that he would have cold resistance. So I do think this is a nice passive that kind of fits lore-wise. When it comes to the others, though, I mean, pick what you want here. Beast Tamer, getting the familiar is really, really useful, but you can't actually have the Panther in-game without mods. So if you want to pretend he has another pet or another animal, you could do that. Pick what you want though, it's going to be up to you. And then you do get some additional abilities here you can pick. You get to pick one more. So you could do Stealth, Nature, or Insight. So this is going to be up to you. In my opinion, you're not really going to be stealthing pretty much at all inside combat, so you don't need the extra stealth. Investigation, you can't actually put a point in, so you could do Nature. Nature could be useful, especially if you do plan to make any type of alchemist potions and things like that. Insight is also pretty good. I'm going to go with Insight here just because I like having it for interactions with NPCs in game, but pick what you want. Okay, and at Ranger level 2, you actually get some spells. In my opinion, there's going to be one spell that I say you must have, and that's going to be Longstrider. Even though it does say this is a spell that requires a spell slot, this is actually considered a ritual spell. So you can cast this on yourself and all your teammates, including any pets, outside of combat for free, and it will just increase their movement by 10 feet until your next long rest. So I would get into the habit of using this ability and just buffing everyone to increase their speed. When it comes to your second spell, either go Hunter's Mark or Ensnaring Strike. It's going to be up to you. Enhanced Leap is also considered a ritual spell, and this could be pretty useful considering you only have 10 strength, so it's nice to increase your jump when needed. I personally like Hunter's Mark though for the extra damage. You do get another fighting style here. You already have 2-weapon fighting for being a fighter, so you have an option to choosing defense for more AC or archery for extra ranged attacks. In my opinion, I like doing defense. If you're trying to roleplay this character, I mean, he prefers to use dual scimitars, so I imagine that's how you want to do combat is melee focused, so do the defense just for the extra AC. Okay, so at level 3, you get to choose your subclass here. In my opinion, Beastmaster isn't going to fit. You don't actually get the Panther. It's really unfortunate that you don't get that as a pet, as a Beastmaster, because it would fit so well lore-wise with him, even though technically Guinevere that he has is actually summoned from the astral plane. Gloomstalker could fit as well because he does spend a lot of time in the Underdark 10 years after he leaves his home. So Gloomstalker would also fit, and it does give you the Dread Ambusher Hide as a bonus action, Umbral Shroud, Disguise Self, extra attack, and more initiative. In my opinion though, if you want to go really just lore-wise, because he does have that hunter state of mind that where he said like he loses himself to the hunter that's inside him, why not go Hunter? This will also give you Hunter's Prey, which is really, really good. And I really like Colossus Slayer. This thing is really powerful. Once per turn, when you attack with your weapons, you'll do an additional 1d8 damage if the target is below its maximum HP. This can also be affected by Savage Attacker 2, by the way, which is another reason why I like that feat. And because you're dual wielding, if you attack with your main hand and hit, they're going to have less HP, so your offhand will automatically get an additional 1d8 of damage. Spell-wise here, pick what you didn't pick before. It's going to be up to you. We already went over spells, so do whatever you want. Okay, so this is where I'm going to end the build. Level 9. I mean, you could go higher if you want for endgame, but this is meant to be a early game to mid-game build. So by the time you get to Act 3, you should know what you're doing. So feel free to do what you want there. But I'm actually going to be going into Champion here just to get the extra feat. So this is now, if you didn't pick Savage Attacker before, when you should. Alright guys, it's time to talk gear for the first build, the hero build. Before we do that, I do want to say, if you would like to optimize this for better damage, you would want to go 5 Ranger and 3 Rogue instead. That way you can get the additional bonus action right away. However, to stick to the lore of Drizzt with him being a fighter first and then Ranger second, I went 6 fighter, 3 Ranger, so do keep that in mind. Alright. Gear. First off, I do have that nice green cloak, which hopefully is the right color green, the same green he has. I tried a bunch of different dyes, and I found that the sage green dye for this cloak just looked really good, which is why I liked using it. Cloak of Protection, +1 AC, +1 saving throws, sold by Quartermaster Tally. She also sells the dye you need as well. Weapons. Thornblade. This is sold by Damon over here in Last Lights Inn. You have to save the tieflings in order for him to be here. He sells this, and this is great because this gives you a cool ability called Poisonous Synergy. Basically, whenever you're concentrating on a spell, all your melee attacks will do additional 1d4 poison damage. These spells include Darkness, Fairy Fire, even your Dancing Light cantrip, which you can just cast anytime because it's a cantrip. This will proc it as well. Your Hunter's Mark also procs this too. Gloves, Flawed Hell Dust Gloves from Damon, give him 3 Infernal Iron. It's just an additional 1d4 fire damage. If you didn't save the Tieflings for whatever reason, pick whatever gloves you want. Spider Soak Armor, really fantastic. This gives you advantage from Constitution saving checks, so all those concentration spells I was talking about to get the extra damage is nice because now you roll 2 dice instead of 1 and it picks the higher dice roll. You have to kill Minthara to get this inside the actual goblin camp, and I think it looks pretty cool because it is drow armor. I'm using the Diadem of Arcane Synergy for my helm. Arcane Synergy is a buff that will give you damage equal to your casting modifier. Wisdom is my casting modifier. It's at 14, so it's +2 true damage. And when it says when you inflict a condition, this is a multitude of things. Conditions can be a bunch of different things. So bleeding, when you go ahead and use your darkness, your fairy fire, ensnaring strike, hunter's mark. There's a bunch of different things that proc it. So you'll see this proc all the time for free damage. You get this from the mountain pass, the main boss you have to kill in that area. One of the mobs near him drops it. Evasive shoes, +1 AC, +1 acrobatics. This comes from, again, if you save the tieflings, there will be a little tiefling inside this building over here named Mattis. That guy right there, he sells it pretty cheap. When it comes to your rings, I am using the Strange Conduit ring. Again, more concentration stuff. So while you're concentrating, your weapon attacks deal additional 1d4 psychic. So 1d4 psychic, 1d4 poison, plus 1d4 fire. That's a lot of additional damage for free. On top of having your additional damage from Arcane Synergy and all that stuff right here, that is all re-rolled with Savage Attack. So anytime you attack your melee weapons, the psychic damage, the poison damage, and the fire damage will be re-rolled to take the higher dice, which is really nice. This comes from the chest after killing the main boss in the mountain pass with the Githyanki. Caustic Band is just +2 acidic damage for free. You buy this from the female dwarf in the mountain colony, or the mushroom colony, I'm sorry. Amulet the Misty Step. This comes from inside the goblin camp, inside a treasure chest. It's a free Misty Step. If you're trying to stick to exact lore, I don't think Drizzt actually uses Misty Step, but it's a really nice ability to have. So if you don't want to use this, pick whatever other necklace that you find appropriate. Other rings that are pretty useful. So if you don't want to use the Caustic Band, another ring that's really, really useful is going to be the Eversight ring. You find this in Act 2. I will showcase where all these items are in a quick montage, but this makes you immune, like basically immune to all blindness. So you can't be blinded from basically anything. This includes your own darkness spell. So if you do plan to use darkness as a defensive ability, you definitely want to make sure the Eversight ring is on. That way you can stand in your own darkness. And the last item is the Bow of Awareness. This will give you +1 to initiative, which is why I use this bow. And Roa Moonglow, the little halfling or gnome inside Act 1 and Act 2, she sells this. You can get it from her in Moonrise Towers, or you can get it from her in Act 1 inside the Goblin Camp. So sorry, I forgot about the other Adamantite Scimitar. You get this from Grimforge, and then Hag's Hair, of course. This will give me my extra dexterity I need to get to 20 dexterity. So pop that, bam, 20 dexterity. Now, okay guys, it's time to showcase this in combat. So I am going to fight the little Thorn boss right here solo. The reason I start in turn-based mode is because if you get the jump on someone in turn-based mode, it will refresh your bonus action and action, which I do want to happen for this boss. So I'm going to come up, and I'm just going to get the jump on her real quick. That way I can start combat right away. So the enemy is surprised. Did a lot of damage to me, but it's okay because I'm still alive. Alright, so I'm going to showcase the power of darkness now because this is just absolutely ridiculous. So I do have my darkness spell up, and I have the blind immunity ring, so I chose to have this instead of the extra 2 damage from the caustic ring. I am going to heal myself a little bit with second wind. I am going to action surge, and we're going to start beating this boss down. So let's go ahead and start attacking her. Let's crit. So I do want to showcase real quick, if you take a look at my damage. So you have the initial damage here, and you see how it says reroll. That's because a savage attacker, that feat I have, it will reroll your melee damage. It does it for your fire damage. It did it for my psychic damage and my poison damage. It's really, really good. And then I even had it reroll the Colossus Slayer for being a hunter subclass, which is really nice. And because I got the jump on her and she already took damage, my next attack in combat actually did extra damage, which is really cool. So my turn's over. I'm just going to end it. All these guys are surprised, so they're not going to attack yet. So the reason I attacked twice with my opportunity attack is because I have toggle dual wield on. You can toggle this on and off. If it shows one sword, if you go to attack with your main hand, it will only use your main hand attack. If you toggle both, it will attack with your main hand and your offhand attack. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to come up behind her now, and I'm going to go ahead and just attack with both because I feel like I don't really need to do anything else right now. You can see this little section right here, though. She got rid of the blindness. Like, she got rid of parts of it, so do keep that in mind. If the blind cloud gets moved and you're in a position where you really need to survive, you are definitely going to want to move back into your cloud. And I'm going to move back into the darkness. And I'm going to end my turn. So the one thing this doesn't block is going to be AoE spells, which is the downside of it, but it will block a bunch of other things, which is really nice. And any melee attacks against me are going to have disadvantage because of the darkness cloud, so chances are I'm probably going to dodge them. I'm now going to open on her with my Hunter's Mark instead. Okay, so now that it's my turn and I opened up on her Hunter's Mark, I got a couple of things I could do. I'm going to just use my offhand attack first, just to get damage on her. And now I'm going to attack with my main hand. I am going to crit. And then I'm going to attack again. And I'm going to use my action surge. I'm going to attack again. And then I'm going to attack again. And I missed the other attack, but you can see I just did a ton of damage to her. And I could do even more with a better setup. If I could use my overload ability, imagine all the extra psychic damage that would have done as well. And the best part about it is all of that is re-rolled. Re-roll for extra damage. The acid isn't, because that's just straight damage from the ring, but like the fire damage, psychic damage, poison damage, slashing damage. And on the other hits, you can see every time it's re-rolled, like how much better that is. And chances are, like, you're always going to hit the higher end of the numbers because of how many times your stuff gets re-rolled. So I did want to showcase that for this build, and that's basically how this build works. I mean, you go in, you want to attack, get your Hunter's Mark up just because it gives you additional slashing damage. If you don't use Hunter's Mark and you need to ensnare someone, you can do it with your Ensnaring Strike. If you want to use Darkness as a defensive ability, you want to make sure you have your Darkness ring on. It's really fun and I enjoy it. But what about playing a different style? I have another dual wield build in the concept of what if Drizzt instead didn't become a hero and followed the path of the Drow, the Lolthsworn Drow, and really just became an evil character. And that's the build we're going to do next. And I actually enjoy that build better than this one because it has more utility overall, because it does follow a different setup. So let's take a look at that one next. Okay, so this second build is revolved around the idea of Drizzt becoming a poison hunter assassin type kind of character, I guess you could say. And my stat spread is one that's definitely more tanky. You can see I have a little bit more constitution and I have way less intelligence and charisma. When it comes to the skill proficiencies, they're pretty much the same, and you can see I'm going strength now instead of going dexterity. And there's a reason for that we'll talk about in a moment. I started out as a ranger knight in order to actually gain heavy armor proficiency with this character. And I went Wasteland Wanderer Poison. I thought with the way this build works, because he's a very poison-esque kind of build, and you'll see why soon, having resistance to poison would make sense. So let's go ahead and break down the levels up and then the gear afterwards. So for this build, unlike before when you started out as fighter, you are starting out as a ranger, and you're going to go from ranger 1 all the way to ranger 5. So just like before, pick the spells that you want, except this time you definitely do want Ensnaring Strike or Hunter's Mark. Either will work, but you definitely want both of these, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. Your fighting style, again, you're dual wielding, so you want 2-weapon fighting. So whatever spell you didn't pick before, pick the other one. Subclass, we're actually going to be going Beastmaster. You could go Gloomstalker or Hunter again if you wanted, but for the theme of this build, you are going to be going Beastmaster. So for your first feat, we're not actually taking ability improvement, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. So for your first feat, it's going to depend on what you want. No matter what though, you will be taking Dual Wielder. So this feat right here will allow you to dual wield weapons that normally you can't dual wield. Long swords, for example, normally are versatile weapons, so you can dual wield these. And there's a specific weapon we're going to want to use that we want in our offhand that we need this feat for, and this will give us +1 to AC as well. So you want that. Another great feat, because you do have low initiative, would be the alert feat. Getting +5 to initiative is really nice considering we only have 10 dex, so that's another really good feat to have. And of course, we already talked about Savage Attacker, how good that is for overall damage. So pick what you want, but no matter what, you will be getting Dual Wielder for sure. But you don't need this until you get to Act 2. So it may be better to have ability improvement first. It's going to be up to, or not ability improvement, but alert first, so it's going to be up to you. Alright, in Ranger 5, the reason we wanted to get the Ranger 5 is because you get the extra attack, but it also upgrades your pet. You get a couple more spells. For your second spell, honestly, pick whatever the heck you want. Spike Growth is really good, and so is Silence. Pick whichever one here you think is going to be the best. Okay, so at level 6, you are now going to start to multi-class into Rogue, which is nice because you get your sneak attack damage. Ability, you don't need stealth at all. You are going to be a kind of like a bruiser, I guess you could say, so you're not going to be stealthing at all. So pick something else. You do have some negative modifiers here, so feel free to increase these if you want. Perception is really nice, so it's good to have that if you want a perception. Athletics, acrobatics, again, pick whatever you want here. It's going to be up to you, but as a rogue, you do get to have some additional things, so pick whichever you really want here. And Rogue level 2, you just get some extra stuff you can do as bonus actions. Not a big deal. What we want is Rogue level 3. This is going to give you the subclass Thief, giving you 2 bonus actions, which is great. And from here, you get your new feat. So now you're going to pick the feat you didn't pick earlier. For us, it's going to be Alert. And because this build stops at level 9, because it's meant to be a early game to mid game build, that's where we're going to stop. Let's take a look at gear. So there are going to be some gear pieces that I'm sure you're going to notice are similar, but there's going to be some that are different as well. Let's start with the different pieces. Your chest piece is the adamantite splint armor. This is great just because all damage is reduced by 2, which is nice. You have a really cool ability called adamantite backlash. So when you do get hit, attackers are sent reeling, which will actually proc your arcane synergy helm for the +2 damage for your wisdom. We are using the poisoner gloves. These gloves are really cool. So whenever you deal poison damage, the target needs to basically pass a constitution saving throw or they become poisoned. And poisoned, they suffer disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. So chances are they're probably not going to hit you when you poison them. But if they do hit you, then you take reduced damage and they get sent reeling, which is pretty cool. And you can't ever get crit as well, which is nice. We're actually going to take out Amulet of Misty Step and we're going to put on a new one. The Brood Mother's Revenge. You get this from killing Kaga in Act 1 inside the Emerald Grove. Whenever you are healed, your attacks do additional 1d6 damage, which is really, really cool. Your cape, if you notice, whenever you poison a target, you heal yourself for 1d4 hit points. You see how this is kind of starting to synergize together? The weapon is the same, the Bow of Awareness for the +1 in regards to your initiative. The other ring is still going to be the Strange Conduit ring because you are going to be concentrating on spells still, so it's nice to get the extra psychic damage from this. The other ring, however, is going to be the Poisoner's Ring, and you want to use this when you know you're going to be in a fight to do extra damage, because this is going to give you the ability to make your enemy vulnerable to poison, meaning your poison damage will be doubled, which is really nice. And this is once per long rest, but it's almost like, even though it says a target, it does it in a small AoE, so you can affect more than one target at once. Weapons seem similar, but we are actually going to replace the adamantine scimitar for a new weapon. So instead of this, we are going to be using the Cruel Sting. The Drider that you killed to get your little fairy for the protection from the shadow drops this, and if you read, it says a drow wielding this weapon deals additional 1d4 poison damage against restrained targets, which is cool. And it also has its own short rest ability called Ensnaring Strands. Basically, it unwebs the target. So this is just a way to get even more poison damage, which is why we are using it. When you first pick this up, it has psychic damage on it, but after a long rest, it goes away. Why? I don't know. But you want to make sure you put it in your offhand, because you do want the sneak attack damage. In order to do sneak attack damage, your main hand has to be a finesse weapon, which is going to be the Thorn Blade. The last thing I do want to say, again, if you know you're not going to be fighting a boss and you don't want to use the Poisoner's Ring, feel free to equip another ring, Caustic Ring, whatever it may be. You want to save the big long rest cooldown for like a boss fight or something for big damage. Oh, and of course the cloak, this is found in Moonrise Towers. I'll showcase where to get all these items in a montage as well. Your pet. Now here's where it gets really cool. So you're going to summon a wolf spider companion. Being a Lolth drow, I think it's fitting that your pet is going to be a spider. And your spider has some cool abilities. So your spider actually can web the target for you, which would then allow your sword to do additional poison damage. It has venomous bite, so it can also poison in general. And it has a cool ability called Cocoon, where you can just trap a creature in it as well. But as soon as they take damage, the Cocoon breaks. So this is like a CC ability, while this is more like a pseudo CC. You mainly use webs just to proc your sword. And I thought it was interesting, with him being known as a ranger, what if instead of a panther pet, he got a spider because he followed Lolth more? So that's where the build idea came from. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one in combat because I really like this a lot. But before we do that, you can notice I have 17 strength, used Anti-Ethel's hair, now you're up to 18 strength, but from Moonrise Towers, there is a NPC, if you let Astarion bite her, you can get Potion of Everlasting Vigor to give yourself even more strength. This will give you strength +2, putting me up to 20 strength. Yeah, it's pretty dang cool. I'm at 20 strength and I didn't even use any ability improvements at all when it comes to feats. Okay, let's check it out in combat now. Alright, so we are going to open up with Cocoon on her. It's only 35% chance to hit, but let's try it anyway. Oh, and she failed the save. That is actually amazing. Alright, let's go ahead and come on in and try to get some big time damage on her.
Time for some bloody work.
It says immune to poison, but with the gloves you have equipped, you can actually get the target to be poisoned. I have her in web, so now I can proc the other stuff. I also got healed, which means I actually get dipped in poison from my neck piece. So now I can really start doing some big time damage to her, which is nice. I can use a bonus action here to go ahead and get my overload, which I am going to do. So now I can do even more damage on my hits, which I guess technically I should have done before I started attacking her, but it is what it is. Let's go ahead and get a crit. So you can just see, like, look at the poison damage I did from all of that. It's a lot of damage. It definitely hits pretty hard, especially on a crit. And that's basically how you play this build. You use your pet to cocoon and web, and then you attack normally with your poisons. Again, if you're fighting a non-boss character, you would want to replace your poisoner ring with something else like the caustic ring or the Eversight ring, so you can use your darkness as well. Another benefit to this build is if you do use your poisoner's ring and you have someone in your party that can use poison magic, like acid spray and things like that, it can hit for some really big time damage, especially once they hit level 10 and get it ranked up to its max level. You can see some incredible damage from your casters with that as well. Anyway guys, those are the builds. Hopefully you enjoyed them. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.